I want to talk to you about what God's done in my heart, but I think it's very biblical. What has happened over the last year with all the things going on in my life, my body has been broken, there's no doubt. I'm not the same guy. I mean, I built the church, I built the chandeliers, I have worked as a carpenter, I physically worked, but now I can't do anything. I can't even tie my shoes, and because it's hard to bend over. So I have fought with this body issue, as far as my heart's good, everything's going great, but I have finally come to realize that I have a broken body. And it took a woman that was on Ted's talk show to kind of convince me. I was sitting there, I was listening to her. She had been a bicyclist, she had been an Olympic woman, she was in perfect shape. She stood up on her bicycle, next thing she knew, she found herself in the hospital, absolutely crippled. And she was in the hospital for 6 months. She went home in a wheelchair. She couldn't walk any longer. She couldn't ride. She was pretty much done with her life. And as she was looking up, airplane went over up above. And she said, that's what I want to do with my life. I want to fly. And Mom and Dad laughed, but she grabbed the yellow pages and she called up, made an appointment to learn how to fly. And so she went over there. She was in a wheelchair. She was in a body cast. She had her hands. And she said, I want to fly. Now, if you've ever flown before, I've had the privilege to fly a Cessna. You have to have your feet, and you have to move your feet and have your hands and everything else. So they laughed at her. But there was one man that said, okay, I'll take you up. And so he said, listen, go ahead and push. Oh, she laughed. She said, I can't use my feet. And he goes, okay, I'll do it. So he uses his feet. She pulls up. She begins to fly. And he says, fly towards that mountain over there. Well, that's exactly where the crash happened. So tears are running down her eyes. She's flying over the place that basically God took everything from her, she thought. She came back and they landed. She got excited, read everything she could, got her feet together, and she began to walk. She began to grab furniture. She began to grab the wall. She had a fire burning inside her heart. She had a passion to fly, and something was going to happen in her heart. And all of a sudden, she began to walk, and she began to learn to fly. And eventually, she was certified to fly. And then she was certified to fly twin engines. And then she was certified to fly commercial airlines. And then she was certified to fly upside down in shows. Then she became an instructor, and to this day, she's now instructing other people at the place that made fun of her how to fly airplanes. And she said something, and all that was good to the very end, and this is what she said at the very end. I have a broken body, but I do not have a broken spirit. And I went, what? And I went back, and I said, let me hear that again. She said, I have a broken body, but I do not have a broken spirit. I said, I can't believe that. So I went back one more time. And she said, I have a broken body, but I do not have a broken spirit. And I thought, well, I have a broken body, and I have a broken spirit. My heart is good. There's no bitterness. But I have not settled this issue with my body. Because I get angry because I can't tie my shoes. And I get angry because I can't do certain things. And some of you are exactly where I'm at. You have a broken business and things aren't going good. You have a broken marriage, and it's not what you really want it to be. You have broken children and broken relationships, and you don't know how to fix them. Or you have broken finances, and you just don't know what to do. And so because of that, you have become very bitter, critical, cynical. And you have blamed everybody else. But that's not going to help you, because we are living in a time of everything seems to be broken. And the Bible is written for broken people. I don't know if you know that. It wasn't written for the healthy, for the people that were all together. It was written for those who are broken. Let me give you an example. The ship had to be broken and sunk before Paul could get to where he had to go. We're going to learn about that. And then we know that the vessel had to be broken in the life of Gideon before the light could shine. And then we know that the perfume had to be broken before they could smell it around Christ with Mary. And we knew that Christ had to be broken, the bread, before the two men on the Emmaus Road could see Christ. So the Bible is filled with all types of things broken, and God is willing to fix it and put it back together. The lepers were broken, and they had to wear bells around them, and Christ was willing to touch them. There were people that were blind, and he healed them. And people that couldn't walk, and he touched them. The whole Bible is about Jesus Christ healing and touching and coming to people, but it's not written for those that are all together. And it's not written for those who are, quote, really very smart and have it all together. It's written for those who have made mistakes and those who have fallen apart, and down deep in their heart, they're not happy. Because the Bible is the only thing that can bring joy and happiness. In fact, everything that you have, your mind, your heart, every success that you have, God has given to you. And so there's never going to be success or fulfillment with what you have or what you make or what you do in life. But if you have a broken body, then you have to deal with that. And so I finally came to really understand that Gail keeps telling me, honey, are you happy? Yeah, I'm happy. But I understood what she was saying. I'm not really happy. I think I'm happy. I want to be happy. I want to do all these things, but it's kind of hard. I kind of get ready, but I feel like a woman sometimes because it takes me an hour to get ready. Like Rob, I go with Rob. He's ready in 2 minutes, and he's saying, are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? No, go. I'll meet you. Why? Because it takes a long time to get me going. I got to put my pants on. It takes a long time to bend over. I can't get my socks on, so I have to use one of those socks things. You know, it just bugs me. But it's okay now. I just get an hour earlier. It doesn't bother me. Things that used to bug me don't. And I finally came this weekend and before then to really say, you know, I do have a broken body. It's okay. I can't frame anymore. That's okay. I can't build or can't do or I can't even walk with her where I want to walk, but I can walk down the street. And I'm thankful for that. So I finally have come to realize that doesn't make a difference. I can teach here in a wheelchair and you be happy, but you will not be happy if I don't have a joyful heart. And the staff won't be happy unless I'm joyful. So if I'm joyful, no one can take that away. But if I'm not, then I shouldn't be here. And so we come to this incredible passage in Acts chapter 27, verse 22, and it talks about cut the ropes now. And that's what I want to talk to you about. It's time for you to cut the ropes and not be afraid. And maybe you have a broken body or a broken relationship or broken dreams or broken ambitions or maybe even a broken relationship. Maybe it's time to cut that cord and begin to get joy in your heart and just have the joy. Because I guarantee you, if the joy comes in your heart, your kids are going to come home, and the husband's going to come back, and the business is going to begin to grow, and people are going to begin to see something about you, that you're different. It's going to be completely different because it's the Spirit of God in and through your life. And so it's time to cut it. And notice they were in the midst of the storm. Paul, the apostle, is now going to Rome. He's going to be beheaded, but he's on his way. He had been in prison, you remember, and the Lord stood with him in prison and said, we have many things to do, Paul, and you will stand before Caesar. And so he's about ready to go on the ship, and he tells the shipmaster, and he tells the soldiers, don't do this. We are in dangerous times, and there's a storm coming. We ought not to take this ship. But they did not listen to him, and so they jumped on it. And sure enough, they took the ship and went out. And all of a sudden, they hit an incredible storm. So much that it just blew the ship for 14 days. Everything was completely gone. They finally had to cut the anchors because they were afraid. And the Bible said they let the ship run. They threw everything out. And these men are sick. They're not steering. They're just setting down. And Paul is there with them. They're about ready to sink. And they've given up hope. And that doesn't happen very often for great sailors. And finally the Lord came to Paul and said, I want you to go and tell them none are going to perish. And I'm here with you. And everything's going to be fine. But no one can leave the ship. Tell them that. And so Paul stood up. And all of a sudden he began to preach. He said, listen, I told you a storm was coming. Don't you hate those guys? I told you, but you wouldn't learn. But the conviction in my heart is there's a storm coming, and we're not telling people. There's a storm coming. Things are going to get hard, but we're not beginning to prepare. We're living in ways we shouldn't be, and yet people don't listen. They don't believe it, but it's going to come. And so Paul stands up and says, listen, God stood with me, and God ministered to me. And he said, no one can leave the ship. And so our text we're going to read right now is all of a sudden they begin to lower the boats and get off the ship. And when Paul said, don't do that, if anybody gets off the ship, we're not going to make it. But if they stay on the ship, we're going to be okay. And it says the soldiers took the sword and they cut all the ropes to all the little ships. In other words, they cut every opportunity off in their life. Let me give you an example. I don't know if I like my wife, so I might get a divorce. No, I don't believe in divorce, so therefore I need to learn to love her. In other words, if you have little boats hanging on, there's always a way out of your marriage, always a way out of your business, always a way out of being a parent or a dad or a grandparent. You can find some reason to get out of every relationship because you have this little tiny boat, or maybe get out of the church because you don't feel good, or quit because you have a broken body, or give up because the business isn't doing good, or because your personality isn't just right, you're going to hop on the boat and go kill yourself. And that's not the thing to do. He says if you stay on the ship, you're going to be okay. Salvation's going to come. And boy, they cut that rope. But I want to tell you, here's the key. Who was the preacher? Who was the captain? Who was the leader? Who was speaking in the midst of a storm? It wasn't the Roman soldiers. It wasn't centurions. It was Paul himself. Paul, the prisoner, was now the captain of the ship. And that gives me great hope for you and I. Because though people are not looking at you, they will one day. And though people are not using you, they will one day. And though the kids might not need you, they will one day. In other words, God is looking for people that are willing to stand up in the middle of a storm and say, cut all the ropes except to Jesus Christ. In other words, turn your life over and begin to trust God. And that's exactly what you have to do. And the crazy thing is your pastor has to do the same thing. It'd be better for me to leave than to just whine about my body. And I can whine about it, let me tell you. Because there's a possibility I might have one more need of surgery, one more time. And I don't know. I mean, I go in Wednesday to find out. They're going to do an MRI. They're going to do a contrast. That means they're going to go in the spine, pull out the fluid, then inject it, and then take more pictures. It's about an hour's worth. It's very painful, and they're going to kind of sedate me, but it's still painful. And they're going to find out why T9 is kind of all messed up and they think it's broken. Well, what are we going to do? I don't know. Are we going to be able to fix it? I don't know. Can God heal it? Yes. What other lessons? Well, maybe God will just have grace on me. Well, he might, but he might not. But I can't walk in bummed out. And you can't say, oh, here we go again. You can't go buy another church or go find another pastor and break him in, but you got a pretty broken one right here. Just pray for me. That's all I can say. So you have to ask yourself, well, do I want a nice and healthy pastor, or do I want a nice broken pastor that knows that it's God, not him? That's the choice you have to make. I'll tell you what. I know exactly who it is. It's not me. It's God. Because every service I get done, it just hurts. But I got to be here. I'm not going to quit. And so it says in Acts chapter 27, verse 22, he says, now I exhort you, be of good cheer. Isn't that something? There shall be no loss of any life among you, but of the ship. So listen, the ship is going down. Things are going to get bad, but we're going to make it. That's what dads should tell their family. That's what granddads tell everybody else. Hey, we're going to make it. No matter how bad it gets, we're going to be okay. For there stood by me this night, verse 23, an angel of God, whose I am and whom I serve, saying, fear not, Paul, don't be afraid. He was scared to death. Thou must be brought before Caesar. See, there's the key. In other words, you're going to go to Caesar. Well, Jesus said that to the disciples. He said, go across the other side. Well, what happened? In the middle, there was a wind contrary. So all night they toiled, and they were afraid they were going to sink. Time out. What did Jesus say? Go across. If God and his word is saying go across, you cannot sink. That's what we have to learn in our life. But that's what we fight against. Jesus said go across, and so they rowed. They toiled. I don't care if it takes you all night. The next day, if he said go across, you're not going to sink. So why be afraid? But their faith was little, the Bible says. He says in verse 25, wherefore, sir, be of good cheer, For I believe God that it shall be even as I told you. And then 2 verses, verse 31 and 32. Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, except there abide in the ship, ye cannot be saved. So if you get off on these little ships, you're not going to get saved. Then the soldiers cut off the ropes and the boats and let her fall off. In other words, they just cut all their little tiny things that they could go to. They cut all their ways out. They finally surrendered everything to God. Steve, I want your body. I don't want to give it. I want you to heal my body. I'm not going to do that. And so I fight with it. I get mad. I get angry. I get down. I get flustered. And then I can't study. And I realize, boy, my mind is good. My heart is good. But this thing over here is I cannot and have not dealt with this issue. Okay, I'm willing to deal with it. I had dinner the other night with Johnny, and she's in a wheelchair. And I had to take her arm and pull it around. But I understand that because every day that's what she has to do. But look at me. Do I look like I'm handicapped? I mean, I feel like I could pick you up. I'm strong. And people say, well, why didn't he pick up a baby? I can't. I can't hold it. And so though my shoulders are strong and my body's strong and I look pretty good, don't mess with me. I can't do anything. I can't defend you. I can't help you. You know, unless I have a gun, I guess. I could do that then. But otherwise, you know, if we're out hanging out, me and you, and a bear comes, you're fine. Don't worry about it. All you have to do is outrun me, and that's all you have to do. See? I'll just sit there, get on my hands and knees, and say, God, this bear is already praying. In Jesus' name, bless you, God, for this food. I know I'm dead. So what are you going to do? But, so I did it. I finally did it. About a week and a half ago, I finally said, okay, God, I give you my body. I don't care. So if you want to help me carry it back, help me. I'm not going to fight you. No, I can get it. I can. If you want to feed me, please do it quick. I'm hungry right now. You know, if you want to do whatever you want to do, it doesn't bother me. And so for the first time in my life, I know the pride is gone. Because a man, I'll do it. I can't do it. Can I tie your shoes? Yeah. I'd ask a waitress to tie my shoes. You know, I don't care. Why? Because I can still go to the bathroom, and I can still walk. And I can still hold my wife's hands. And no matter what happens there, I can still tell her I love her, and we love each other. So what I want to share with you this morning is very important, that here the words come with such power and that Paul was able to minister in the storm because he did not have a broken spirit. He had a broken body. His life was just filled with pain, but he knew his course, and he knew that God had led the ship. And sometimes we don't understand, God, why this ship? Why are you pushing the ship this way? Why is my life out of control? But here is the thing we don't understand, is that though it's out of control, it's not out of control. Because when the ship came out of the darkness, it was exactly where it had to be. It was 475 miles closer to Rome than it was before. So though they had to cut the ropes and they couldn't hold the rudder, it just went, and there was no sun, and there was no moon, and there was no stars. They couldn't guide themselves. They couldn't figure it out. When they finally came out, they were at the island of Malta. And check it out. There was a guy on Malta, the father of Publius, who was praying, God, could you heal me? And this is crazy. God said, I'd love to heal you. I don't have anybody. No one wants to go. Oh, I know. I got a ship going that way. And I have an apostle on that ship. And they're not going to stop because they're on their way to Rome. That's much more important. Who wants to go over here to Victorville? You know, when I was called to Victorville, I said, is anything good come out of Victorville? I don't, you know. So I pastored in Victorville. And then I went to 29 Palms. And I said, there's definitely no good thing that comes out of here. God, this is terrible out here. But I fell in love with it. And so all of a sudden I realized that Paul's on his way. And God says, I think right now we're going to sink this ship. And Paul says, don't worry, you're not going to die. And for those of you that love surfing, guys and gals, the very last verse of chapter 27 says, and the ship broke up and everyone grabbed boards. There's your surfing verse. They took it right in. Great verse. And they went in, and Paul was handcuffed. And they're all laying on the ground. And who gets up? Paul. And who walks over and begins to pick up the wood? Paul. And who gets bit by a serpent? Paul. And what does everyone say? You see, the gods were trying to kill Paul, but they couldn't do it. So now we know the gods have really got a hold of Paul, and Paul shook it off. And they kept looking at Paul, and when Paul didn't die, the Bible in the King James says, and everyone changed their minds. Now they knew he was sent by God. And so he went and healed this man, and the whole island came to Christ. And here we are on the ship complaining and griping because we had to break down in front of this hotel we didn't want to stay in, but by the time we got done, we were able to lead somebody to Christ. Or we had to eat at this place we didn't want to, but we ran into somebody we just found we didn't know from high school. And what we do in our life is we get so angry because we will not let God guide us. We have our plans, and that's okay. I want you to be organized. But if your car breaks down, or if the freeway's closed, then listen to what God's telling you, because he might lead you, and don't ever be afraid to understand something about storms. They can be used to discipline you, like in Jonah. God went after Jonah. They can be used to correct you, like the disciples who were not listening and watching the miracles. And so after the miracles of the bread, Jesus wanted them to trust God, but they didn't pass the test. They can be used to chasten you. Jonah was down in the belly of a fish for 3 days, seaweed wrapped around. Or they can be used to direct you. So here we hate storms, hate what God does. We need to start learning to love it. And I just simply come to you and say to you that, what do? I mean, you can get really angry. You can really cop an attitude. And as you get older in life, you can get even more bitter. And you can become even more resentful. But is that really what God wants? Well, why is that? Well, my ship, I got cancer. Or I can't walk. Or I don't have the strength. Or I'm forgetting where I lay my keys. Well, you can, most you teenagers, I know that's where you're at. So what? Hang the keys here, or I love the iPhone because I can now find my phone. I have an iPad that tells me where my phone's at. It can tell me. So they know everything, but here's the cool thing. So I drove up to the mountains. I couldn't put my chains on, but they were there to meet me to put my chains on. Drove me out, couldn't really carry much, but they unloaded the car. And then we were stuck in this snowstorm for 7 days by ourselves. It was great. Then they came out, loaded me up, and took my chains off, and off I went. Does that bother me? It used to. Make me really mad. Now, man. In fact, it was pretty nice. I felt kind of spoiled. So now you have a spoiled pastor. I don't know if that's even worse. But I have come to you, and I want to apologize, because for too long, I have been talking really about this broken body. No more. I've accepted it. It's who I am. But I have a mind and a heart and spirit and joy. I think what I want to teach you is that no matter what's broken in your life, relationship, business, finances, it might just be God directing you, leading you, or it might be somebody calling out for help, and you're on the freeway, and you break down right in front of that hotel. If you have a sensitive spirit, God's going to use you. But if you have a bitter spirit, it's over. You have to cut the rope. You have to trust God with all your heart. And the more you hang on to things and ways out, the worse it gets. Cut the rope and trust God.